Welcome, everyone. I believe we're live, so we'll go ahead and start the meeting today. Thanks for everyone for coming, and welcome to the most fun committee, actually maybe one of the friendliest committees on either side. At least that's what we've been told, so I'm sticking with it. So anyway, welcome. We're friendly. Whether we kill your bill or not, we're friendly.
Yes.
Anyway, welcome. We are going to start off with a continuation of House Bill 99, the Property Tax Refund Program. And I would like to start off by inviting Director Henson up here to give us a little bit more information, and welcome back.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Chairman Brenda Henson, Director of the Department of Revenue, and with me, Christy Urich, the Administrator of the Administrative Services Division, and I say group responsible for administering this program historically, but it's important to note that it's not like we've got everybody working on just this program. She also does the collection of taxes and distribution as well. So with that, we started off Tuesday, and due to time, I kind of jumped through the handout that I had provided and focused mainly on the language in the bill. But what I'd like to do first thing this morning is kind of walk through the handout that I provided, just to give you an opportunity to ask questions related to how it is administered today. We've provided you with a copy of the application form for 2021. I did want to mention that prior to the 2021 tax refunds, it was all done with a manual application. We were able to have Enterprise Technology Services provide us with a program that allows taxpayers to apply online now. We didn't have a lot of folks do that out of the 4,000 plus applications that we received. Approximately about 400 actually completed it online. But obviously there's some documents that you have to attach when you do it online, and some folks felt comfortable doing that, others did not. But we're hopeful that this year and each and every year afterwards that more people will apply online. Certainly that means the information is keyed in once and we don't have to have staff members keying in it again. So as you can see, the application itself really is only 2 pages. The back page and the signature page, provide instruction, answers to questions. We do revamp this form annually, just we learn every year, what language is confusing to a taxpayer. So along with this form, we also produce a pamphlet that has the updated numbers. As you know, both the median residential tax bill for each county changes annually, as well as the income numbers. And so we update this on an annual basis. So in that late March, first part of April, what we'll do is we will send these by mail to everyone who applied for the program in 2021 automatically, just a reminder that the program's available. Are there any questions that the committee would have on the application of the pamphlet? If not,
Questions, committee? I guess not.
If not, Madam Chairman, the next document is just a comparison of the refunds that were provided in 2019. As mentioned before, we didn't have funding for 2020 and then tax year 2021. And you can see that the number of applications increased significantly from 1,587 in 19 to 4,395 in 2021. Although you will see that 3,000 of those plus qualified for the refund, and we had about 1,310 that did not. And again, the difference in the average dollar refund went from $533.19 to $601 in 2021. And certainly we anticipate, even with current law and the current guidelines, that program will expand for 2022 refunds. And then, of course, if this bill passes, we've got a fiscal note that addresses the additional folks that we believe would qualify. Any questions on this document?
Yeah, Senator Baldwin.
Just a quick question, and it's a small question, that is, of those that disapprove, what's the biggest reason for people not being approved?
Senator Chairman, the main disqualification is about 77% usually as on an average, and it's over the income limit.
Follow-up?
With that, I felt the committee would be interested in looking at the past 10 years and what that median property tax bill has been in each of the 23 counties. Again, just information, but you can see that fairly level through the years, a little bit of an increase each year. But we did see significant increases in that median tax bill from 21 to 22. So again, that is going to enable more people to qualify, but those refunds would be larger as well. The next document, of course, we went over a little bit, and that's really the 2022 information. And I've also included another document for your review this morning. It does get a little bit confusing related to the exact calculation of the refund. And so this document just gives you some examples. I used the 2022 Albany County 1/2 of the median or maximum refund of $934.60. And you will see that number on this document, just for Albany County, so that you have a reference point. So I provided you with 3 examples of tax bills. So in Albany County, if the total tax bill is $600, which is less than the maximum refund of $934.60 under current law, the refund would be $300. If the language on page 4, line 14, were to pass and include that 90% up to the 1/2 of the median, then that calculation would be $540 in refund. The next example is a tax bill of $1,500. Again, 50% of that would be $750. But under that language that includes the 90%, that calculation comes out to be $1,350. However, the maximum refund under this law is the 1/2. And so the $1,500 tax bill would receive the $934.60. And then going on, just looked at a $3,000 tax bill. Even though 50% of that $3,000 tax bill is $1,500, the maximum refund in Albany County would be the $934.60 again. So I hope that that's helpful in the calculation methodology. The other piece of that is with our program, we're fortunate in that all of these calculations are done by our software. And so we just have to include the income. It knows to go out and calculate 50% and then compare that to the maximum for that county, and then apply the correct 90% if it's applicable. We have already tested that programming in a test environment, and we feel confident that we could get the programming that's required by this legislation in place for the 2022 refunds. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions about the refund process itself, or if you'd like to discuss the appropriation as it stands today.
Committee, what's your pleasure on this? Questions? I have just one. Now, you say the software is in place. How about staffing? Do you feel like with the current staff that you have, do you feel like is it going to create some hardships for you if we pass this bill in its form?
Chairwoman Schuler, certainly between that March and September timeframe, it takes a significant amount of staff time. We had given up the one position that focuses on this program during the COVID-19 cuts, because the program wasn't funded. The position happened to be vacant, so we gave up that position. during my supplemental budget request, I asked to have that position funded again. And it was cut from the original budget bill in both houses, but the House put it back in. The Senate did not. So at 9 o'clock, I'm hopeful that the conference committee will see to go ahead and provide that funding. It's $108,000 for us to fill that position for the next fiscal year. And I'm hopefully that'll happen. What happened last year, we didn't have a position. Obviously, the program was funded and we found out in March and really had to hustle to get it out there and get the applications put together. But we got it done. I will tell you, I had mineral tax, property tax, all hands on deck. We were keying in applications, making sure that those refunds, the last day for the refunds to go out is that September 30th by statute. We got them all out in time. The one thing I would say is that that was the first year, so we were keying in every one of those applications from square one. The program itself now, if they applied in a past year, the only thing we're going to need to update is the new household income, the new tax bill amount. And so we believe that even though we believe if this bill passes from 4,000, we believe there probably will be 7,000 applicants. And we believe with the way the software works that we'll be able to administer the program. But I really am hopeful that I get that position back that can be fully dedicated. Honestly, the keying in of the applications is one aspect, but as you can imagine, the phone calls that we receive as applicants are filling those applications out. What do you mean by household income? What has to be included? And honestly, the folks that are applying for this program, some of them have no intent of ever applying online. They want that manual application. And as I stated, we send the paper applications out to county treasurers across the state. Applicants can go into their offices and complete these and leave them with the county treasurer, and then the county treasurer remits them back to the Department of Revenue. So, the deadline for applying for the statewide program is that first Monday in June of each year. And so we see a lot of those applications coming in right at the deadline time. So I believe we can do it.
Other questions? Just one, I know I had folks that called me about, of course, their tax bills, and I sent them to the county, and every one of them, I said, let me know how it went. Every one of them felt like, at least in my county, that they were very helpful, and they had all the information they needed. So I think the coordination between the state and the counties has been good thus far, so we appreciate that. And particularly with the extra, I know we're going to have more to apply if this passes.
Chairwoman Schuler, I really appreciate the county treasurers and their working with us to put together the amendments that's in this bill that staggers the administration of the programs. We just feel that that's going to be beneficial. Now, keeping in mind, for 2022, we don't have a great number of counties that have opted to fund the county option. For sure that I'm aware of, possibly another one. But I do know that the confusion that may exist for a taxpayer on, if I apply for this one, can I apply for the other one? Keeping in mind, under current law, they can apply for both. But if I've got a $1,500 tax bill and one half of the median is a $500 refund, they could get $500 from the state, they could get $500 from the county, and then they still have a portion of that tax bill that they would be responsible for. But with that, stand for any other questions the committee may have.
Other questions? You actually just answered one that I had, is if they could apply for both. So I appreciate that information. So, all right, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Appreciate your testimony. I think we probably have some folks in the room that would like to testify on this bill. So, excuse me? Yes, we do. I know we have at least two legislators. Two? Well, let's start with the legislators first. Representative Storr. Welcome.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman, members of the Senate TRW committee, excuse me. I know a couple of you did serve on the Revenue Interim Committee, so are familiar with these issues. And for those of you that weren't, I just wanted to provide some testimony about the inclusion that came from an amendment I brought over in the House to include what is known as a circuit breaker provision in the bill. And you'll find that on the top of page 4 for the state program, and the top of page 7 in the gross copy of the bill. This is something that's used in 18 states, and it kind of recognizes 4 things, I think, that not all assets that are exempted under the provisions in the bill doesn't include things like nest eggs that are assets that are not in an IRA or a bona fide pension fund for some folks. And that certainly in my community, retirees, longtime retirees are being priced out of their homes. So it also introduces an ability to pay criterion that property tax otherwise lacks. And also recognizes that property taxes are generally regressive, that we ask people on the lower income level to pay a higher percentage of their income in property taxes than people who are wealthier. So this really came about as I was campaigning in Teton County. Needless to say, property tax was a very hot topic. Frankly, as I went door to door, almost everyone brought it up, no matter what kind of home they lived in, frankly, because our property values are so high. An average home in Teton County, and by average, I mean like a 1,500 square foot, 3-bedroom, 2-bedroom bath, very modest home is valued at $1.5 to $2 million. So that translates to a property tax of $9,000 or more. And so I heard a lot of stories. Some of them were less sympathetic than others. I had to remind several people with very valuable assets that was a second home that frankly that they had very low property taxes as a comparison to the rest of the state, through the rest of the country. Ours is one of the lowest, and certainly the lowest that if you are a resident, you're not paying income tax as well. So, but there were some sympathetic stories I heard as well on the campaign trail, and that's why I brought this amendment. And these are longtime residents who really have lived in the county for 30, 40 years, raised a family, are now set to retire, have had a small business in many cases, and have been responsible citizens by actually having saved for their retirement. And yet, because of the asset provision in statute, they would not qualify for a reduction in their property tax. So I tried to figure out what was the best vehicle we could bring to do that, and that's how I landed on the circuit breaker idea. So it's worth noting that there was the idea that the Revenue Committee did bring want to bring the income limit up to 125% of median income, was also a signal that we were really trying to help people, frankly, middle income people as well, throughout the state. And because we were looking at a property tax increase in the last year of double digits in 21 out of 23 of our counties, I actually think that makes sense. It may not make sense down the road, but it makes sense for now. And also because of the provision of the additional $5 million that in a year that the state has done exceedingly well, to be able to give back some of that money to folks who are struggling with inflation, not just in property tax, but in energy and food costs. I think this is an appropriate way to give a break. But we just still seem to be missing that sector of folks who had saved. So in this case, the income limits and the residency requirements and the owner occupied would all still apply. But the asset limit wouldn't. And a good example of who this would qualify for is if we do have a 70-year-old retired widow who's been living in her home it would apply across the state, but probably most applicable in Teton County because of our values. So her home would be worth $1.75 million, and that would be a tax liability of about $9,400. Her gross income is $60,000, but she actually has non-exempt assets of $200,000. So she would not qualify without the circuit breaker provision. With this, she would qualify for what is, as Director Henson said, half the median tax in the county, which would be about $4,200. And so she'd have a $4,200 break on her $9,400 break. And if the county does decide to do a refund program as well, then she would double that and still be liable for about $1,000. So that's the amendment.
Questions for Representative Storr? I just have one. How did this amendment, how was it perceived on the other side of the hall? Were there a lot of questions on, whether we're just, giving tax breaks to the rich and famous in Teton County, or what were the conversations over there, just out of curiosity?
It was actually well received, not very many questions. We talked about it a little bit in Revenue Committee, decided it would be a second amendment. I brought it as a second amendment. It actually had an age limitation, 62 or older, but Speaker Summers asked us to lay them back for the budget that week. So it was a day later that we brought them as a third reading amendment. And we'd heard some feedback at that point from the assessors and frankly, members of the House, that they liked the idea that it would not have the age limit on it, and partly just to simplify it. I'm excited that this won't require any coding costs for the Revenue Department. They can just do it through the application process. You really just need the two numbers that they're already asking for, which is income and tax liability, and just do the math. And then you would qualify without the assets. I do think, there are two cases I've thought of that scenarios where someone that maybe we don't necessarily want to give a tax break to could qualify under this. It would be if someone who is wealthy but somehow has a adjusted gross income on their federal tax that is under the median income, the 125% in Teton County, that will translate to $128,000 this year. If they have a lot of deductions or something like that, it would be quite unusual though, I think. And, it might be, if we see that happen, we can certainly flag it and come back and make some adjustments. I think the likelihood of that is pretty low. It's possible, but it's pretty low. Even if they did, if they have a $6 million home, which many of them do, that would just mean that they would have a tax break of, again, $4,200 on their $36,000 tax liability. So they would not wipe out the entire amount. The other scenario perhaps is a young person who does have a trust fund, who's moved to Jackson Hole, isn't really working too hard, has an income that's under the $128,000, and they could, they could apply. But the 5-year residency also, comes into it, and I think means that most of those people by then are working pretty hard anyway. So So I think again, we could consider some sideboards. I was encouraged to keep it as simple as possible and kind of take a look and see how it goes. The amendment was, we didn't have a division on the amendment. It was pretty clear. And then the bill passed unanimously.
Other questions for the representative? Senator Guru?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Good morning.
Good morning.
We've talked about, you and I have talked about, Teton County and the disparity and the outlier price differential on home prices. But when I take a look at this and all the information that the good director gave us, when we talk about your amendment and I look at, take Sheridan County, for example. Sheridan County has a gross, at 125%, 2022 gross median income, $81,515. And then I swing over and look at the 2-year property tax differential, 2021, 2022, it went from $1,611.15 to $2,078. So actually, your circuit breaker would probably be of a fairly large impact to middle income people in that specter too. I look at that. I also look at Park County. In Park County's 125% median is $80,625. I mean, a household, if you got a family of 4, you're talking about not a great deal of money. Yet the tax increase there went from $1,700 to $2,279. So while when we talk about it, it's, when Teton County numbers are there for everybody to see. But it does have applicability in other counties. Wouldn't you agree?
Representative Storer?
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Senator Guru. Yes, I do think that's exactly right. I actually, many of the other circuit breakers that you see in other states actually reduce the number down to less than 10% of income. Some are as low as 4%. The average, again, the average for percent of income that you pay in property tax across the state does vary with income levels, right? But and there may be some ways to fine tune this in the future. I actually ran a bunch of scenarios for 6% and 8%. I ended up at 10% because, I don't know, it's a nice round number, and it seemed like a good place to start. But I think even with the 10%, it will be applicable. What it comes down to is, is your property value so high that you have, and your income is especially for retirees, is low enough that you would qualify in that case. So, yes.
Mr. Guru, or Senator Guru?
Thank you. Yeah, just to follow up, and I can go on with other, whether it's Laramie County, Sublette County, there are other counties where this is, Albany County especially with their median income. But I know that students are involved there. Some of the people that live there, it's kind of that's an outlier on the median income side. I know the other way to talk about this would be to raise it to 145% or 165% of median income. Did you look at that and say, well, if you did that in a lot of these counties, then that would put everybody in the program. So that really wasn't quite exactly what we were looking for. So did that factor into how you ended up with the circuit breaker?
Representative Storer?
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Senator Guru, that's exactly right. And in fact, it's worth noting because the bill provides for, and what's in statute now, I believe, is you can look at either the county median income or the state. And that's just kind of a sense of equity, right? That if the state overall, if you can use that in one place, then you should be able to use that in the other place. The fact is actually that it is because of places like Campbell County, Teton County, Laramie County, I think, are the higher median income. So when you look at, about, I think 16 counties are actually, their median income is below the state income, median income of $66,500, I think it is. And so when you look at what percentage of their income, median income would qualify, you actually get into the 150% arena in places like Goshen County where the median income is lower, for example. So yeah, I actually graphed out kind of using the economic analysis folks' income brackets for the state, and realized that even going to 125, we brought in a whole bunch of more people. So it didn't seem right to do that, and that wasn't the problem I was trying to fix. In some cases, I have constituents that are actually paying almost 20% of their income because they're on fixed income. They're retired. They're trying to go fishing and enjoy their lives after all these years, but they only have $50,000 and they're paying, $10,000 in property tax. So that was what I was really trying to address.
Any other questions for Representative Storr? Okay, thank you so much for your
Thank you.
testimony. Appreciate it. I see a couple other legislators in the room, but I think they're here to testify on other bills. Is that correct? Okay. Anyone else from the public that would like to testify on this bill? Welcome. Introduce yourself.
Good morning, Madam Chairman. I'm Ken Giel, Laramie County Assessor. I'm here on behalf of the Wyoming County Assessors Association. We're in support of this bill. A lot of work was done during the interim, and we very much are in support of this bill. We don't administer it at all. It's the Department of Revenue, and we know it's in good hands there. So we are in support of it. I will tell you, I had a constituent come into the office asking for property tax relief. And of course, we sent her across the hall to the treasurer to get the application. I ran into this person later on down the road that year or this last year, and she came and thanked me so much for sending her a check. Of course, I had nothing to do with that other than sending her across the hall. But she was very, she said it couldn't happen at a better time to get that check with everything else going up and her property tax too. So with that, I'll stand for any questions, Madam Chairman.
Questions for Mr. Gill? No? Thank you for your testimony.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Other testimony? This looks like double trouble coming to the table here.
That's just one of them.
Yeah. Welcome. Even though we know you both, please introduce yourself.
Madam Chairwoman and members of the committee, my name is Ashley Harpstreet. I'm the Executive Director for Wyoming Taxpayers Association. We are a 501c3 and a 501c4 think tank. Our mission is to advocate for sound tax policy for a healthy Wyoming economy. Positions that we take are based off an analysis of the legislation against our cornerstones of taxation through our policy committee. Recommendations are then forwarded on to our 20-member board. As in the analysis, as we mentioned, we look at the four cornerstones. Is this justified? Is the tax equitable amongst taxpayers? Does the proposal create a stable revenue stream? And finally, is the tax transparent, visible, accountable, and audible? Based off that criteria, WTA does support House Bill 99, property tax refund, as it sounds to be sound tax policy for the following reasons. It is justified as property tax have increased dramatically, and this provides targeted relief. It is equitable as it applies to the taxpayers that fall within the required criteria. The expansion of this program makes it more inclusive to the residents. It is stable as it protects the reliable revenue stream and provides relief to those only in need by affirmative action. It limits volatility as it is distributed within the targeted recipients. It is transparent as this expands the success program currently in place. I will let you know I've had a busy season this session, and we feel this is the vehicle to provide immediate and targeted relief. Thank you, and I'll stand for questions.
Questions for Ms. Harpsworth? No, Senator Grew. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning. When you say your committee's looked at this bill and you've gone through your analysis, I take it that means the bill as amended?
Ms. Harpsworth?
Yeah, Madam Chairman, Senator Grew, yes.
Thank you.
Any other questions, committee? He took the words right out of my mouth. That's exactly what I was going to ask, so appreciate
Okay.
that. Go ahead then.
Madam Chairwoman, members of the committee, I'm Jeremiah Reeman here on behalf of the Wyoming County Commissioners Association. We stand in support of the amended version as it stands right now. I wanted to provide a couple of touch points for you specific to this issue. As you know, this bill also contains revisions to the county option program that was just passed last year. There are currently 4 counties that offer that program: Converse, Lincoln, Teton, and Sublette. I've also been advised that Laramie County is looking to do that, and perhaps we'll have a couple of others that will consider it later this year. In addition to that refund program, some counties have reduced their mill levies for a variety of reasons. Campbell County has traditionally actually had a lower mill levy than they are allowed to set. It's currently at 11.235 mills. Fremont County reduced their mill levy down to 10 mills, and Teton County has for a long time actually had a much lower mill levy. They have the lowest mill levy in the state at 7.379 mills. I wanted to also touch on something you may hear, something we heard in the House that I've heard from some of your members about skin in the game. Why don't counties have skin in the game in this issue? And I would argue we do. I just mentioned to you 4 counties that are offering this program. When they do that, the schools still get their money, the municipalities, the special districts, they're doing it, the counties are doing that out of their general fund. So they have considerable skin in that game, and I hope you can carry that forward. You also heard Ms. Harpstreet talk about how this is the most efficient means of getting relief to the people, and we absolutely agree. Let me just give you one scenario. Let's assume that all of the counties out there reduced or eliminated their mill levy, their 12 mills that they're allowed to assess. That would probably save the average homeowner about $225 to $275. And you've already heard today that this program can offer refunds in excess of $500, maybe even as high as $5,000 or more in instances. So it is, by that demonstration, a much better way for my members and the state to offer relief. And with that, Madam Chairwoman, again, we do support, and I'd stand for any questions.
Questions for Mr. Reeman? I just have one. You anticipate that Laramie County might join the county refund. How about others? Are there others that have the funding to be able to do this, or are you aware of that?
Madam Chairwoman, I've only heard expression from the commissioners here that they are going to consider it. I don't want to prejudge what they may make as a decision. I've not asked other counties that directly, but I would anticipate that at least a couple of additional counties will consider it for this coming year.
Other questions? Oh, go ahead, Senator Ellis.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a lighthearted comment. I know we use skin in the game all the time, and so throughout the session, I've been thinking of alternatives. Just kind of doing a quick internet search. We could also say epidermis in the competition. Just a thought.
Don't you think he looked at
Don't you think?
bronze boots?
Oh, I do.
I will add that to the bingo card and make sure it's in my next testimony.
Well, if there's no other questions, thank you very much for your testimony. Appreciate it. Gotta have a little levity. I told you we were a fun group, so. Others in the room that would like to testify? We can bring a couple of you up at a time if you'd like. Welcome. Please introduce yourself.
Good morning, Chairman Schuler, Bill Winnie, Sublette County. I'd like to offer a little different thought. I come by way of this much as Representative Starr did, knocking on doors in roughly the same geographic area. And the issue is cost of living adjustment for retirees, teachers, state troopers, other state employees. They will complain that they don't get very much. And my perspective on that is I retired from the Navy 20 years ago. I have a Navy retirement check, and it has virtually doubled because of the cost or the cost of living adjustment at the federal level. And I understand, I haven't done a study on it or anything, but it's very clear that people, teachers, whatever, do not get essentially the same thing. So I think that's another perspective to throw in the game, subject to your questions. Thank you.
Questions for Mr. Winnie? No? Thank you. Appreciate your testimony. Representative, well, I guess former representative, welcome.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman, members of the committee. I'm Andy Schwartz, former representative, and representing the town of Jackson. Most of what I wanted to say has already been said, but what I'd like to stress is there's been a number of property tax relief bills this session. And the reason Jackson supports this and maybe one other is that first, it identifies people most in need for relief. And second, it does not affect revenue streams, which I think both are critical points. And other than that, I will stand for any questions.
Any questions for Mr. Schwartz? I keep wanting to call you representative. No? No?
I got nervous looking at Senator Guru.
Appreciate your testimony. Welcome. Introduce yourself, even though we know you.
Thank you, Chair Schuler. Tom Laycock, AARP Wyoming. We're supportive of this bill. And I'll tell you a little bit about why. You know, last year, you folks were nice enough to put $3 million into the property tax refund program. The program hadn't been funded since 2019. Now, interestingly enough, it was a quick cycle, right? So you guys let the money out in March. Applications were due in June. Ended up with about 4,400 applications. About 3,800 of them were actually funded. Now, the last time that program was actually funded in 2019, 1,400 applications total. So in a quick turnaround, that tells me that there's appetite, there's need, and we've been hearing about it from our members as well. The other thing it tells me is that part of the reason we like this bill is because it's means tested. We're not giving away all tax dollars, you know, as we may with other options. And so you've got someone that's actually doing the verification there and making sure that we don't lose probably more tax revenue than we need to. So for those reasons, we see this as the preferred vehicle for tax relief this year.
Questions for Mr. Laycock? No? Thank you. Appreciate your testimony. Others in the room that would like to testify? Come on up. Welcome. Introduce yourself, even though we know you.
Good morning, Madam Chairman. Pete Obermueller with the Petroleum Association of Wyoming. Morning, committee. Just wanted to offer our testimony that we too support this bill. The issues of property tax, of course, of great interest to us because the minerals industry pays the lion's share of property tax. Statewide, minerals pays 54% of all property tax. But if you drill down to, no pun intended, down to the county level, it becomes even more stark. Madam Chairman, in Sweetwater County, the total tax yield is data from my friend Ms. Harpstreet, but the total tax yield in Sweetwater County is 87% minerals. And the commercial and all other, so residential, is less than 2% in Sweetwater County, similar to all other counties with the exception of Senator Guru's, which is almost entirely residential and commercial. I think it's 1% minerals. So our issues, Madam Chairman and committee, is when we're looking at these property taxes, is we have opposed all of the various property tax bills that have come before you this session that structurally change the tax code, that make that percentage gap even bigger and bigger and bigger. This one, a targeted relief, does not structurally change it. It allows for some targeted relief and some timely relief dependent on economic conditions. Will it drive that percentage gap bigger? Yes, but not structurally so, the way that constitutional caps or those sorts of things would. So despite the fact that this does push more burden onto industry, we still support it for those reasons. So happy to stand for questions.
Questions for Mr. Obermuller? Oh, thank you for that. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Good to hear from your organization on this. Anyone else in the room that would like to testify on this bill? Okay, do we have anybody online?
Madam Chair, we have Emily Paravicini.
Okay. Go ahead and let her in. I might not be able to pronounce her last name, but welcome. Love to hear from you.
Good morning. Can you hear me, Madam Chairwoman?
Yes, we can.
Good morning. My name is Emily Parvasini, and I am the Sublette County Treasurer, also the president of the Wyoming County Treasurers Association. And we are in favor of House Bill 99. It does give us some epidermis in the proverbial game, and it makes us have the ability to actually be the good guy for once, which we kind of all appreciate. One of the things that I really like about this, the updated amendments and things like that that have been introduced by Representative Storer and also the Department of Revenue is that it staggers our timeline just enough so that we know what the state has been issued and so that we don't have to worry about potentially paying somebody more than the 100%. So we can go up to that percentage without having to worry about going over and still being able to provide some relief for people that need it. And at the end of the day, that's what this bill is really all about, is the people that need it. We don't want really trust fund babies that don't have to have a job and aren't working, 2 jobs to try to make ends meet. This is about the single moms and the single dads and the grandparents and the folks that are literally doing all they can just to put groceries on the table and heat in their houses without having to force them to move to somewhere else because they can't afford their property taxes. Sublette County's property taxes went up a lot this last year, and I anticipate they'll probably go up again this year simply because of the way that our tax system is built and that it reflects the current price of what property is selling at. Since the COVID pandemic happened, Wyoming has been discovered. And with that, people are selling their $3 million condo in California and coming here and going, heck, I can buy a big house with lots of amenities for $2 million, woohoo! And then they have money left over and it's a win for them, but it really hurts our folks that have been here for a long time and haven't made adjustments to their house. They haven't done any of those kinds of things, but suddenly their property is worth 10 times what they paid for it 10 years ago, So I really like, as a representative of our association, we really like the provisions in this. We like to be able to make some help, some honest help. And as Jeremiah said, there's a lot of bills out there right now that are proposed to try to help folks with their property taxes. But this one is tried and true, and it works, and people know about it, and they expect it if it's funded. And just in our county last year, we had several more people apply simply because we really put the word out. I put stuff in the paper and, we told everybody we knew. We put flyers up at the senior centers. We really advertised it a lot because people were hurting so much more this last year. So we did have a lot more applicants. And I was surprised at how many people applied that have 2 incomes and still were able to qualify. I do want to bring attention to page 5. In so it's line 7 where it says subject to the adoption of rules. So I think that and maybe this is just my interpretation and maybe I need to be clarified on this. The adoption of rules means that as the counties, we have a little bit of wiggle room and that we can go up to these amounts. Is that correct, Madam Chairwoman? Do you know?
Anyone know that? I'm not sure that I know that answer. I
Madam
don't know. Senator.
Madam Chair, I think that's the Department of Revenue's rulemaking, so I'm sure that the county officials that need to be involved in that can communicate with the Department of Revenue, and I'm looking at Director Henson just to make sure that's right. Yeah.
She's nodding her head, so I believe that's correct. Yeah, good question.
Thank you. Madam Chairwoman, I think that part of the hesitation for some of the counties is because this money comes out of our general fund and they're worried about how much it's going to cost. And so if we do have a little bit of wiggle room as far as those rules and because it is a percentage of their tax and we're not funding the whole thing. And I think that honestly, most counties are taking a very, very hard look at this if they're not already participating. So we're very much in favor of it and I stand for any questions.
Questions? I appreciate you adding the fact that, you guys went out and really did some good PR with it. I think that's something that every county, whether folks want to be interested in joining their county program, if it's available, or the state, I think that's really important. So I appreciate you doing that.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman.
I don't see any other questions, so thank you for your testimony.
Thank you.
Any other testimony? Okay. With that, we'll go ahead and close public testimony then. Committee, what's your pleasure on this bill?
Move it.
It's been moved by Senator Baldwin, seconded by Senator Guru. Any revisions or amendments or potential changes on? I won't go page by page. I'll just let you guys tell me if you have anything at all that you see that you have questions about. No questions? No? Any comments? All right. With that, we'll go ahead and take a roll call vote.
Good morning, Madam Chair. Property Tax Refund Program, House Bill 99. Senator Baldwin.
Aye.
Senator Ellis.
Aye.
Senator Guru.
Aye.
Senator Jones. And Chairman Schuler.
Aye.
We have 5 ayes, ma'am.
Thank you. That bill is passed, and we'll see it up on the Senate floor.
Who would like to present?
I'm not sure who would like to present. Maybe Mr. Senator Guru?
I'll help you or some.
Okay.
I'll vote for Guru.
Yeah, let's vote for Senator Guru.
Thank you.
All in
Yeah.
favor?
Yeah. He'll be the one. I think I might be in the chair today, so if it ends up this afternoon, I would be able to anyway, so, all right. Let's move on. We've got some other real important bills coming up. Let's go to House Bill 123, collection of antler or horns by residents and non-residents. Representative Berger from my neck of the woods, welcome. Glad to have you here. What can you tell us about this bill?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So my name is Representative Ryan Berger, House District 49. And Madam Chair, committee members, for the next 3 hours, 17 minutes and 22 seconds, I'm going to bring you.
You'll be here by yourself.
That's still a little joke in our area. I bring you House Bill 123 for your consideration. So, Madam Chair, this bill just pretty much delays horn hunting for non-residents for 3 days in areas in Wyoming that are designated seasons for shed hunting. Okay. This bill is in response to an ever-increasing amount of non-resident horn and antler hunters in our state, and especially in those southwest and even northwest communities in our state that have those designated areas. Okay. This bill will just simply give resident sportsmen a 3-day head start on the shed collection. And give you a little background on this. When obviously I'm a newbie, and I was thinking about what could I do that's just more than property tax, and what could be a feel-good bill for our residents. I was thinking, I am a teacher, I teach disabled kids, and they go shed hunting a lot. And the big complaint is the people. And their dads and their moms take them out. We do give those disabled and elderly a competitive advantage during the hunting seasons, open up to 5 days prior. And I thought, well, let's do that. So I went and talked to the speaker, and he says, well, Representative Berger, I have this idea. So why don't we take these 2 ideas, instead of just separating them out, let's just do 3 days for all residents and help all residents, and not separate disabled and elderly. Let's just do this for our residents of Wyoming for 3 days. So, Madam Chair, if you don't mind, right now I would like to walk you through the bill.
Please do.
Okay. So we start on page 1. So again, this is an act relating to game and fish, providing that any shed antlers and horns on public lands are property of the state, providing the Game and Fish Commission the authority to promulgate rules to establish seasons for collection of antlers and horns. So if we go down to section 1 there, line 14, page 1, Madam Chair, we go into a section here, 23.1.103, the ownership of wildlife. So what we go on the next page, what we say here, the purpose for this act, okay, that all wildlife in Wyoming is the property of the state, including shed antlers or horns located on public lands. Now, remember, private landowners will still be the owners of their sheds. Okay, so we're not changing that. All right. The reason is this is important because it establishes that the Wyoming Game and Fish now has the authority for horns on public lands. That's the big part. Okay. So then we go into A. If we go to line 15 right here on page 2, to regulate and control the collection of shed antlers and horns of big game animals for the purposes, and we give these purposes, and we go down to 22, line 22, pursuant to this paragraph, the commission may also establish rule seasons for the collection of big game shed antlers and horns on public lands. Any season to collect big game animal antlers and horns shall begin for residents, here we go, 3 days before the start of the season. This does not apply to private lands. Now, we've given you a map up there. If you take a look at this map, and remember in like 2019, they talked about this, but if we go along the green line here, okay, anything east of that green line, the Game and Fish doesn't make seasons for, okay? Anything west of that line, they do. Now, right now, the red line, so anything kind of west of the red line, north and south, you see that red line, that's southwest Wyoming, northwest Wyoming, south. Those are the seasons that they put in so far. Those are the seasons. And so this bill only applies to those seasons, okay? One thing I want to say, and the last thing on the bill when we walk to, if we look at section 2, remember that the Game and Fish Commission, we want to let them be able to promulgate all the rules necessary to implement the provisions of this act. So again, the question is, well, how do we decide if they're a resident or non-resident? Well, have a driver's license if they say, when they go out and talk to all their people, what will it be? A driver's license. It could be last year's resident fishing license, or your elk license, or it could be your registration in your truck, So there's many ways to prove that you're a resident of the state. So, but we'll let the commission promulgate that. And again, that's the bill. And right now I'll stand for any questions.
Questions for Representative Berger? Senator Baldwin?
More of a compliment than anything. And I would tell you that in my mind, on page 2, the most important part of your bill is not the 3 days. The most important part is there on page 2, line 3 and 4, and that's including the shed antlers in it for the management. And as everybody, there's not very many people left here, but I always joke and call this bill, this is the roadkill bill of the current time, as we considered roadkill for
years,
all of my time in the legislature. And this has been the new thing. We've been dealing with this and dealing with this. And this one sentence, putting antlers under the jurisdiction, that's a big deal.
Yes.
And that's the most important part of the bill. My question for you would be, any opposition you've received when you're on your side of the Capitol from those non-residents that then are disadvantaged by 3 days?
Representative Berger?
So I've had a few emails and phone calls that I've taken, and they're concerned, and the opposition, they're concerned that they won't be able to shed hunt. And that's not what we're doing here. We're just giving a 3-day competitive advantage for us. I do know in other states, for different reasons, let's say the state, can I say a state, Madam Chair? Madam Chair?
Just say the state west of
The state, it's east of us and northeast, North Dakota, but they open up seasons for a week in some of their areas, not all their areas, for pheasants. And they say residents only for 1 week. And it still hasn't hurt their non-resident use or anything. I called and asked their game and fish to just, was this, at first it wasn't received very well by non-residents, but this is the way it is. They wanted to get back to their residents. So everybody says, why 3 days? Well, it's not 7. And I thought 3 days would at least give that little bit of competitive advantage, and especially give the 3 days to our residents to have that competitive advantage. Thank you, Mr. Barber.
Other questions? Senator Ellis?
Thank you, Madam Chair. 2. 1 on page 2, line 4. When we talk about public lands, we have this discussion a lot in this committee.
Mhm.
Are you intending just federal public lands, or are you wanting to talk about state lands as well? That's my first question. And then the second, do you want the department to set these rules? If you do, then why the word may on line 23 instead of shall?
Representative Berger?
So public lands, yes, they're all the public lands that are open to those areas. So I believe Madam Chairman, Senator Ellis. So yes, I got to get into this decorum thing a lot better. So, so when we say public lands and when we mean public lands, it's the public lands that are open to those areas. So on those areas, it could be BLM lands, it could be some, I don't know if it's federal lands, but I think it's all state lands.
Follow up,
Madam Chair, maybe we'll get some clarification from Game
Yeah.
and Fish and see how they look at that, because we talk about that a
Yep.
lot. Okay, and then the last one is why the may instead of shall, if you want them to write these rules and set
We're-
those seasons. Line 23, page 2, should we say shall instead of may?
Representative Berger?
So, Madam Chairman, Senator Ellis, I don't know. That's a good question. And maybe we should ask the Game and Fish if they would rather have shall or may. We'll ask them on that one. I guess that didn't come up in our committee.
Okay, Senator Ellis has a question for you. Go ahead, Senator Ellis. Oh, gosh, Senator Ellis. That's all I can hear.
Jones, Ellis.
Catching on today.
Madam Chairwoman, Representative Berger, do you know, do any other states have this same advantage given to their residents?
Representative Berger?
Madam Chair, thank you very much. I don't, as I look through other states and what they've done, I believe we'll be the first state to do this with our shed hunting. It just depends on different species. They do it with different animals, like the example of North Dakota, how they open their season for the residents first week for their pheasant season. That's what I know.
Any follow-up? Any other questions? I just had one.
Mhm.
And of course, I guess I could ask the agency, but so do you anticipate starting 3 days before the May 1st? I think May 1st is the date that we start, right? So would this start 3 days before that, or would we start May 1st with the residents and then, or have you anticipated that or visited with the agency on that?
Great question, Madam Chair. So the start of May 1st, the very first day, and those first 3 days of the beginning of the season, not before, just those first 3 days starting May 1st. Now, we've also looked at, if you look at the effective dates, there's sections 2 and 3 of this act is effective immediately, but then we expect the commission to go back. It'll be the next season, not this season, but the next season, because they'll go out and promulgate the rules and make sure they get everything set, and then make their rules for this season, and then we'll go from there.
Senator Baldwin has one more question.
I was just going to add on to that comment, and the department can comment to this as well. May 1st is generally the date, but a winter like this one, that may well be delayed because it may be winter until July this year. And those animals are still down on the ground. So they may say, stay off those wintering areas for now.
Senator Ellis, did you have another one? I got the right name this time.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I do have a question. Just looking online, it looks like other states tackle this in a couple different ways. Nebraska, for example, they allow you to keep any shed antlers by antelope, deer, or elk, but it's unlawful to possess, buy, sell, or barter mountain sheep or any part of mountain sheep, except as permitted by law or regulation from their commission. So I was wondering, as you worked on this, had you given any thought on maybe looking at just what we're really getting after? Is it really just elk, deer, antelope, or is there concern about other things like mountain, like sheep?
Representative Berger?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Senator Ellis, I believe as we talked about this, it is in statute that we cannot take the mountain sheep in our statute. So this will only deal with our elk, deer, and our antelope horns, antelope or horns. So the other ones are antlers, but yes, correct.
Sorry.
One last follow-up. Just so we understand how this works, I know, I'm sure you're familiar with the Elk Refuge in Teton County, and every year the Boy Scouts that was kind of their event, was to gather antlers. How does that work then in the national park, or the National Refuge, I guess it is? Why is that permitted? Is that a federal program? I'm just wondering how these two would work.
Representative Berger?
Madam Chair, and to my knowledge right now, we don't want to interfere with that program. In fact, I was, Senator Ellis, I was on that, and that's something we don't want to do. We're looking at the seasons within what our game and fish, and I don't think the game and fish, and I'm not for sure, but I don't think the game and fish regulates that. I think the park regulates that.
Any other questions for Representative Berger? Okay, thank you.
Do you have
thank you.
anything
Yeah,
just one more thing.
Sure.
This is a really good feel bill for our residents. A lot of things. I've had a lot of great comments about it. And the last thing I just want to say is just about protecting our resource, and got to give them, they've had a hard winter. And I'm hoping that in the end, but just given our competitive advantage for 3 days, takes a little pressure off those animals and put some smiles on some faces in our communities,
Thank you.
on our sportsmen.
Thank you very much for your testimony.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Go ahead and hang around in case we may need to ask some follow-up questions, but now if we get our agency folks up here, we'd love to hear from them.
The legislator wants to speak to it.
Oh, yeah. I'll let him go after the agency. Welcome, Director. Chief.
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Brian Nesvik, Director of Wyoming Game and Fish Department. I'm joined here today by the Chief Game Warden, Rick King. Rick's got the lead on this bill. I'm going to let him talk through and hopefully get most of your questions answered. I thought I would start with the state lands question and then we'll move. There were several questions and I think some things we need to clarify. But with regards to the state land question, I think the current bill as it's drafted would not, state lands are not defined in Wyoming as public lands. And so if the desire of the legislature is to include state lands, it either needs to be added to this bill. If it's not added to this bill, the way we would approach that is we would coordinate directly with the Board of Land Commissioners, Office of State Lands, and work through, and we have to do that now with this particular topic. So either way, I think that we're going to have to address it. It's just a matter of whether you want to do it in statute or whether we're going to go do it with the Board of Land Commissioners. With that, I will turn it over to Chief King.
Welcome, Chief. What do you want to tell us about this bill?
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the committee. My name is Rick King. I'm Chief Game Warden for Wyoming Game and Fish. I think maybe I'll just start with a little bit of background because I think it'll be relevant to this bill as well as the next. So late 90s, early 2000, we saw this big surge in interest in collection of shed antlers and horns across the state. And a lot of that activity was occurring while critters were still on the winter range. And so the concerns that we heard from our constituents and from our agency folks was that activity was becoming so popular that the amount of disturbance on winter ranges was significant. So we discussed amongst the commission whether the commission had the authority back then to regulate shed antlers or horns, and it was determined they didn't. So in 2009, the legislature created this first bit of this statute to give the commission authority to regulate collection of shed antlers and horns. Fast forward, there's been a few modifications over time, but currently the Game and Fish Commission has a Chapter 61, a regulation in place to regulate the collection of shed antlers from January 1 to to May 1, 6 a.m. on May 1st. So during that time, folks can't collect shed antlers. After that, it's legal to pick them up. So just fundamentally, a little bit of shift that occurs with this new bill is that under the current statute, we're concerned about the time frame of critters on the winter range. This kind of now extends the time frame a little bit to where the regulatory action will occur beyond May 1, when most of the critters have moved off the winter range. Let's see, Director Nesbitt addressed the state land issue. What we've done in the past is we've worked closely with state lands, and that they've promulgated their rules to match our shed antler collections. And I would imagine that we would continue to do so. And then in terms of coordination with other agencies, as it was mentioned in Jackson, May 1 is like a holiday for folks showing up to participate in collecting antlers. And so between the Forest Service, National Elk Refuge, and us, and even Teton County, everybody kind of coordinates their rules and regs so that on May 1 at 6 a.m., everybody gets to go collect shed antlers. And I would imagine that we'll continue to do so. With that, I'll stand for any questions that you might have.
Just a couple things to add, Madam Chair, if I may. So right now, the commission has the authority to do these, to regulate and have these seasons, if you will, west of I-25, and we don't have those seasons everywhere right now. There are certain places in Southwest Wyoming, Platte Valley, where we do. Then there's other places like, for example, the Bighorn Basin, where we have not at this point. We have had those discussions and had public meetings and those kind of things, but have not implemented them in that part of the state. So it's important to know that, because there certainly could be some new action required by the commission. I suspect if this were to pass, it could shift some of that non-resident pressure to places where we don't have an antler season right now. It can be done, the authority exists, but it'll require some change. And then specifically on a question regarding bighorn sheep, currently in Wyoming, that's regulated under a different statute, and a person can pick up a bighorn sheep head, and then they've got 15 days to check that in with the department and get it plugged, which is just an identification number. As far as kind of along those lines that Senator Ellis brought up, shed antlers and horns are defined differently than a head that still has the skull cap intact, and it's apples and oranges. That's handled a different way, and those heads have different requirements as far as having an interstate game tag and having to have department permission in order to remove those. So I think we might have covered most of the questions, but we'll see if we didn't.
Questions? Senator Ellis?
Thank you, Madam Chair. No, and Director, I appreciate all that clarification. So I guess the question I have then is, usually when we say public lands, we're not talking about state lands, but are there areas of state lands where you know that this activity occurs, where if we added the word state lands, it would just make your lives a little easier, so you could set those seasons and rules for those areas?
Yeah, Madam Chair, and Senator Ellis, certainly from the department's perspective, that's very workable. I don't know what the Board of Land Commissioners would think of that, but I think from our perspective, it's something we can definitely implement. And there are state lands, everywhere, and including the areas where people pick up shed antlers.
Madam Chair?
Follow-up? Go ahead.
Additional follow-up, and I'm just thinking of the public reading this. Do you think the bill is enhanced if we added clarifying language, including shed antlers, which have been dropped by antelope, deer, or elk, just for the public that's reading this to know that it's specific to those species, or is it unnecessary? I'm just wanting to make sure that from the public's perspective, when they read this, they don't assume it's something beyond that.
Chief?
Madam Chair, Senator Ellis, so currently in rules and regs, we define the shed antlers that this is applicable to, and it'd be my recommendation that we just leave the definition in rule and reg.
Madam Chair, one last
Yes, go
follow-up.
ahead.
So again, back to the National Elk Refuge collection, if you were to promulgate rules, would the 3-day advantage for residents apply for the National Elk Refuge if this were to proceed? I want to make sure I understand how that all works.
Chief King or Director, whichever one would like to answer that.
Madam Chair, Senator Ellis, the National Elk Refuge regulations would be separate from ours, and what what they would do would be to regulate the access to the refuge, and it could very well be in conflict with what we do in the state statute.
Other questions? Senator Baldwin?
And is that true on all the national parks, say Fossil Butte National Monument, Teton National Park? I believe that's true as well, is it not, Director?
Chief King or Director?
Yeah, Madam Chair, Senator Baldwin, I would agree with you. Yeah.
Any other questions?
Madam Chair, one last
Senator-
one.
Senator Ellis?
Just want to make sure, I think the intent of the bill is that you will write these rules. So on page 2, line 23, the may versus shall, I'm thinking of just saying shall so that you do it. I'm guessing you will, but
Chief King?
what if you don't want to? And then you say, well, we don't want to, we're not going to do this.
King, do you have a
Madam Chair,
preference
Senator
there?
Ellis, will certainly, whatever the legislature's intent is, the commission will follow suit. So I just would leave that to your call.
Other questions? I have just one, and it's one I've always wondered about. Why don't we do this statewide? Why does the east side of the state, they're not involved with it? Do people not shed hunt on the east side, or is that just something I'm not aware of?
Yeah, Madam Chair, mostly it comes down to the amount of public versus private land.
Okay.
So this is an activity that's extremely popular on public lands where a lot of our winter ranges are, and that's where we saw a huge amount of disturbance. But in areas of private land, it's more tightly controlled due to the access issue, so it's not as big a concern.
The other thing I'd add, Madam Chair, is that there's certain areas even of public land where the access is more difficult. And so, if you think about some of the public lands in the higher country, we actually have big game that winter at fairly high elevations, deep snow kind of country. And a lot of times the access is limited to a point where there's not a significant amount of activity all at the same time. Whereas that was the case in the places where we have implemented these seasons. And I say that, and there's certainly opinions on both sides. We have heard from the public in some places where they would like to see additional regulation, and some places where they don't want any part of it. So we've really tried to focus hard on where we have to do it in order to protect big game. From the Game and Fish Department's perspective, once that antler falls off, that antler doesn't mean a whole lot to us anymore. Our interest is really in protecting live wildlife.
Yes, go ahead, Senator Ellis.
Madam Chair, one last question. In other conversations we've had in this committee, I love camping at our state parks. And so I've asked our state parks for years, can't we allow in-state campers, a couple days or maybe a week earlier access to book their campsites at state parks? And repeatedly I'm told all the reasons why that might jeopardize some federal funding. And I understand all that. I just want to make sure we've really thoroughly looked at this. Is providing this 3-day advantage run afoul of any of your federal regulations that might jeopardize federal funds when we start treating out-of-state versus in-state, people differently? I just want to make sure that that's really been looked through carefully.
Director?
Yeah, Madam Chair, Senator Ellis, certainly there's a legal basis for the way that the state provides resident hunters access to hunting licenses in a broader manner. That we allow a lot of advantage to resident hunters because wildlife is defined in state statute as property of the state. That's well established legally. This is a different situation because it's access to federal land. With that said, there's no federal funding nexus that I'm aware of that we would jeopardize at all with this bill passing, specific to funding to the department. Now, other legal questions about federal land and access, I don't have a good enough legal basis to be able to provide you an opinion on that.
I have just one last question, Director or Chief, either one of you. In terms of enforcement, do you see some issues there with your game wardens trying to enforce, the out-of-staters that may come in and may not have haven't got the word yet that this is happening? Do you see some problems there, or do you think this is something you guys can handle okay?
Yeah, Madam Chair, I appreciate the question and the concern. So I think a couple of things come to mind. One, the commission will have to promulgate rules, and we'll have some time to get those in place before 2024. So I think we can get some messaging out there to hopefully curb some of that. And it will provide an additional lift for our folks, but I think through promulgating rules, we'll be able to address it.
Thank you. Anything else? Okay, thanks so much. Appreciate your testimony. Senator Kolb, did you want to testify on this bill or the next one? We'd love to. Okay, come on up. All right. Welcome.
Thank you. Senator Kolb, Senate District 12. Madam Chairman Schuler, members of the DRW committee, I'm in full favor of this bill. I realize it's a new attempt to deal with the situation. I'd just like to give you, I guess, a broader view. I can state that people line up to collect sheds, go out there and miraculously find all sorts of them and fill a pickup truck full and take them out. You might call it geocaching, but I think we definitely need to level the playing field a bit for people that live here. I mean, we live in Wyoming to basically take advantage of these things. And, you know, this is the place we love. And this bill would help us out a little bit. And that's why I'm in favor of it. And I'll stand for any questions if you had any.
Questions for Senator Kolb? Thank you for your testimony. Appreciate it.
Thank you for listening. Thank you.
You bet. Anyone else from the public that would like to testify on this bill? Anybody online? Okay. Oh, is there somebody else? Oh, come on up. We'll do the ones in the room and then we'll catch those guys that are online. Welcome.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Ben Hornock, House District 42. So I would just urge a little caution on this. I have heard from many people that, and you've heard from the department that May 1st, 6 o'clock in the morning, it's like the starting pistol going off. This does attract a lot of non-residents. It does add to our tourism industry, which is our third largest industry in Wyoming. And so most of the horns, probably 90% of the horns, are collected within those first 3 days. Now, there's not going to be, you know, as many people obviously going out on the first 3 days. But I would just say that in my opinion, I think the playing field is fairly level. I mean, everybody gets to line up on the starting line at the same time. So whether you're a resident or non-resident, I have just heard from people that are pretty opposed to this because they think that there's going to be nothing left after the first 3 days for them to come to, for them to, you know, put it on their calendar from out of state. There are people train dogs to sniff out antler sheds. I mean, it's kind of a big deal. So I would just urge caution and keep that in mind. And as you move forward with this bill, I don't know that it necessarily solves a problem. I think if everybody gets to line up at the starting line on the same day, it seems like that's pretty fair. So thank you.
Questions? Okay, thank you for your testimony. Appreciate it. Anyone else in the room? Come on up. I knew there had to be more people out there that wanted to testify on this bill.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Lee Livingston, outfitter from Northwest Wyoming, and spent many a day collecting antlers in my younger day. And actually, it was a substantial part of my income. One thing that has concerned me about antler hunting seasons is that if we don't have something like that, the next step to protect our game herds is a blanket closure of any activity. And we just saw that happen over in the state of Utah. They said it's shut down for right now because of protection. So I think this is a good step in the right direction, allowing Game and Fish to have legal possession or legal authority over the antlers and the horns. I'll stand for any questions.
Any questions? Appreciate that testimony.
Thank you.
Anyone else in the room that would like to testify? Okay, we'll go ahead and bring in the folks from online. Okay, let's go ahead and bring him in first. I won't try to say the last name. I'll just say Andrew. Welcome, Andrew.
Hi there, can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. My name's Andrew Jakovac. I am a resident of Wyoming. I live in Teton County in Jackson. I'm an avid hunter, outdoorsman, and shed hunting. In shed hunting, I've been shed hunting for many years since 1998. Born and raised in Idaho, moved to Wyoming, moved to Montana, and have lived here for the last 8 years. The largest concern I have about this bill is equal opportunity. We're talking about public lands, which are open to, and public lands, we mean federal public lands, and that's open to everyone after our May 1st opener for wildlife closures to protect our wildlife resources. There's the biggest concern is enforcement on this. There's not going to be any way of identifying individuals and telling them to stay off public lands during this 3-day head start. Whether or not they're collecting shed antlers would be whether they determine to break the rules or to follow the rules. But you can't tell anyone to be off from federal lands from May 1st to May 3rd. And, our enforcement's already shorthanded. I don't see how this is going to be a help to them as well. Extending this for 3 days, even if they have to enforce it, May 1st is a huge issue in our state, primarily because shed hunting everywhere else in the Western United States, unless there's a closure like Utah just implemented, the shed hunting's mostly done by May 1st. Deer start dropping their antlers as early as the middle of December in Idaho. Elk start dropping their antlers in the middle of March. And we're seeing people picking up antlers and trying not to harass wildlife in other states, which I really appreciate May 1st being an opener for Wyoming. It keeps those threatened winter ranges and these animals healthy. Unfortunately, every other shed hunter from every other state comes here because they're pretty much done, right? And our antlers are still sitting on the ground. So that's why we have such a focus on Wyoming for all these different states of people coming here and supporting a tourism economy, essentially, by showing up to pick up antlers. There was one mention of disability, and I support getting people into the outdoors in any way possible, right? What I'd really like to highlight is individuals with physical or mental disability have access to go pick up sheds on private lands whenever. Individuals with disability, we're talking about a competitive sport where there is a lot of different things on the line. There's people who rely on this for their finances. There's people who just love to go out and wander around. To put this into a frame of reference, brown elk antlers are going for $15 to $21 per pound. So if you find a mature elk that's a 6-point, say the antlers weigh about 8 pounds each, you're looking at a hefty payout for picking up those antlers. And there's a lot of individuals that are drawn to this sport because of that. It's also a great way of just getting out and walking around. So I think by identifying residents and non-residents, one, you're going to have a lot of conflicts, which is going to be difficult to manage as far as enforcement goes. Two, we already have a lot of issues with people breaking the rules and going on closed winter range to pick up antlers already. And a lot of those people are resident or non-resident. And what you're encouraging is individuals who are non-resident who suddenly have a 3-day disadvantage to say, well, I'm going to lose anyway, might as well break the rules. And I'm really fearful of this because we tie finances to this. We tie livelihoods to it and people's passions and what they love to do. I'll try and be as quick as I can with wrapping this up. I know we're trying to keep it under 2 minutes. The biggest thing that I think is the biggest challenge is just not equal opportunity. I do support, addressing the main issue, which is finding a way to enforce wildlife closures to protect our living natural resources, the animals that the state's trying to manage. And as we'll see in House Bill 276, this is an option with creating a conservation stamp and managing those willingness to pay for playing in the sport for resident and non-resident to buy a conservation stamp to legally collect antlers, which will also reduce the number of people that are participating in the sport. I see that there's a huge demand on local state and federal law enforcement right now. With our singular opening at May 1st, 6 a.m., it's a huge drain on our local law enforcement, and we're asking them to extend over 3 more days. I just think that there's a lot better ways to address this issue, which again, our primary focus is to preserve our wildlife resources and make sure that they have a full winter period undisturbed, and then can transition into, surviving the winter and growing throughout to support a hunting season. Madam Chairwoman, and the committee, thank you so much for your time. I'll be open for questions.
Any questions? Senator Baldwin has one for you.
Thank you for presenting, Andrew. I just have one quick question for you, since you're about the third person to mention it. The Utah closure of lands. It's my understanding that they closed those lands until May, and it was because of the pressure, because of the harsh winter. I don't think they closed their lands entirely to shed hunting or closed them. I just want that clarified so that everybody on the committee and everybody listening hears that. It's not a total closure. They closed it just like we did in Wyoming till May to get the pressure off of those animals rather than the year long or whatever they had. I think that's an important differentiation. Can you clarify that for us, please?
Yes, sir. Absolutely. The closure was due to the extreme snowfall they've had and the stress on the wildlife resource. If you have people walking around and bumping animals, those animals are hanging on by a thread to begin with, and the exertion that they have to apply to move through this country to avoid human interaction is what's pushing them over the edge and having a huge wintertime mortality rate because of human influence or impact on those heavy snowfall years. So it's due to the weather impact and the effect on those resources, which is why they implemented. They also did this in 2018 with the April 15th opener for shed collecting. And again, it's like we're looking at the animals have antlers on their head at some point in time. They drop them at some point in time. So if you're really trying to be as efficient as possible, you're walking around on their tracks, just like you would hunt them, but you're looking for their sheds and their bedding areas and their feeding areas. And that in turn affects them negatively unless they've had a chance to move off from where they were wintering up to higher elevations so that you're not impacting them, which is why we have the May 1st opener here.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Yeah.
Any other questions for Andrew? Seeing none, thank you very much for your testimony. We appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Anyone else online?
Madam Chairman, we have Laura Pearson online.
Okay, go ahead and bring her in. Welcome.
Hello, Madam Chair and members of the committee. My name is Laura Tolliver Pearson. I'm a sheep rancher in Southwest Wyoming. I'm for this bill, but I'm just wondering about enforcement as well, because we have people that are coming in behind our ranch probably April 20th, April 25th. You know, they come at night, and we don't feel like it's our duty to be a whistleblower on that. You know what I mean? And I just don't know whether you're going to have the enforcement to be able to do this. But another question that I had is, so if someone is caught out there early, what is the penalty? What are the fines? Do you guys know that? Do you know what the fines are?
I'm sure that the agency can tell. I know it's a citation. I'm not sure how much it is, but I'm sure our chief could give you those fines.
Okay, and then a third question would be, what about our immigrant workers? Like, we have sheep herders that are coming through this area on the trail, and considering that they're working for a Wyoming resident, are they going to be able to pick up those sheds?
Again, I think
they're working. Yeah, so I just think that immigrant workers need to be added into this as exempt, because there are a lot of them coming through this area with trail herds and things like that. And so to tell them that they can't pick up the horns, it's a little extra money that they make when the horn hunters come through in the fall looking for horns. But it's not like that they're out looking for horns actively, but if they see them, are they going to be allowed to pick them up on May 1st? So that was another question that I had for you.
Thank you for the questions. I think maybe I'll defer to the chief or the director to answer those, but I appreciate your testimony, and if the chief will come up, maybe we can get some answers to those right now. Thank you. Hang on.
Okay, well,
Go ahead, chief.
Madam Chair, thank you. So to answer the first question, a violation of this regulation is a low misdemeanor, and it's a $450 bond. It could be a fine up to $1,000, but the bond schedule is $450, and could be up to 6 months in jail as well, but just the standard citation is $450. And then in reference to sheep herders that are here, they wouldn't meet our residency requirements per se, unless we did something different in commission rule or reg for them. But she's correct that they wouldn't meet the current definition of residency for game and fish purposes.
Yeah. Thank you, chief. Any other questions?
So would there be a way to add the immigrant workers as an amendment?
I believe that's kind of what the chief
on this bill?
I think that's what the chief is saying with them agency having the ability to promulgate the rules. That's something that they'll probably take a look at.
Okay.
They do that. But any other questions? Okay. Thanks so much for your testimony. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Is that everyone online? No, I think we're good there. So, all right. Let's go ahead then and close public testimony, and what's your pleasure on the bill?
Move it.
Okay.
Second.
Senator Baldwin made the motion, and the second was by Senator Jones. Any amendments or anything else you'd like to add? Let's start with page 1. Anything there? Page 2?
Madam Chair?
Oh, go ahead, Senator Ellis.
Madam Chair, I'll take this in maybe a couple different segments. I think I move on page 2, line 4. After the word on, insert state or. So the sentence would read, including shed antlers or horns located on state or public lands.
Okay.
And then along those lines, page 3, line 2, insert designated state or. So it would say that pursuant to this paragraph, the commission may establish by rule seasons for the collection of big game animal shed antlers or horns on designated state or public lands.
Can we add your shall to your amendment?
Yeah.
And then along those lines, Madam Chair, page 2, line 23, change the may to a shall.
Did you get all that, Doreen? Okay. Good, okay. All those in favor, or do you have any discussion first on those amendments? Okay, all those in favor of those amendments brought by Senator Ellis, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, those amendments have been adopted.
Madam Chair,
Yes,
another one.
sure.
Page 3,
I didn't think you were through.
I know, delete lines 6, 7, and 8.
6, 7, and 8.
Renumber section 3 to section 2. On lines 12 and 13, delete except as provided in subsection B of this section, semicolon. Just have it read, this act is effective July 1st, 2023. And then delete paragraph B, lines 15 through 18. That's the motion, I'll explain it.
Okay, so have some comments on it? Anybody else first? Yeah, go ahead and explain.
Madam Chair, so this is something I'm seeing increasingly in our bill drafting. We are adding all this needless effective date language that our agencies can start promulgating rules. That's effective immediately, but the act doesn't take effect until July 1st. We are not taking, I'm going to be very clear, we're not trying to take away the department's ability to do rulemaking. I've seen this, I was listening to the House debate the other day. That's not the intent of this. There's already rulemaking contemplated in the bill on page 2, line 23. And the commission already has broad rulemaking authority. So there's no affecting the rulemaking. It's just a cleaner way of drafting bills. This act shall take effect July 1st, 2023. If this were to pass both chambers, the commission can start its rulemaking, but it can't really formally promulgate that process until it passes. I think we've heard explanation that this would likely take effect for May 1st. So I think the commission would have plenty of time to promulgate its rules. This is just something I think we need to start getting back to is these complicated effective dates. We do this on occasion, and this is more for people listening and that aren't familiar with this. Sometimes we need to mess and tinker with rulemaking, effective dates, delayed effective dates, and so you need some of this ability. But by and large, most of our statutes don't need this complicated effective date. So I'm a purist, Madam Chair. That's the motion.
Any comments or questions? Thank you. Question's been called on that particular amendment. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, that amendment is passed as well. Did you get all that? All right, you are so efficient. Wow. Thank you. All right, with that, if we don't have any other comments, we'll go ahead and take a roll call on the vote.
Thank you, Madam Chair. House Bill 123, collection of antlers or horns. Senator Baldwin.
Aye.
Senator Ellis.
Aye.
Senator Guru is an aye. Senator Jones.
Aye.
And Chairman Schuler.
Aye.
We have 5 ayes.
We have 5 ayes. That bill is passed. That'll go to the Senate floor. Would you like to present that, Representative Kolb? Okay. Like I said, I would be happy to, but again, if it comes up early today, I'm in the chair, so, be better if somebody else did it, so, yeah. Thank you. You're catching on. Yeah. She is a wordsmith, so.
No, you're not.
All right. No, I think we have time to go ahead and get started with this other bill. We might be able to even finish it, but we'll see if we can or not. But this is House Bill 276.
Madam Chairwoman, my honorable senators, will keep it short and sweet, and I believe we can.
Okay, welcome,
This is a
Representative
good
Wiley.
little bill. Thank you. So,
Short and sweet. We
short
love
and
that.
sweet. All the commentary and stuff we've had today, I want you guys, especially for the southwest part of the state, picture these old pictures of the land grabs we had, right? So you're having these people line up, May 1, they're ready, and then bang, you go out to somewhere that's the most sparsely populated area you've ever seen you see a little headlight dot as far as you can see across the countryside. And I've had countless constituents come up to me and said, Representative, can you do something to help? And I said, of course, we'll work on it. That's our job. So anyway, here we are today. And Senator Ellis, I have a friendly amendment here later if you want to add anything else to it, because I know you Senate folks like to make sure we have the House bills nice and polished.
Yeah.
But I'll just run through the bill kind of quickly here since we're pushed for time. It essentially requires non-state residents to purchase a conservation stamp in order to harvest these sheds. There's some exceptions in here for nonprofits that covers the Boy Scouts up in Jackson, 15 and younger. So, we don't want to take away of this skill building and the just kind of the heritage from the children. So we put that in there. And then we also did a date here that's department friendly on page 2 pursuant to this paragraph. It goes from 6 a.m. on May 1 to the end of June, because those are the high impact areas. And it not only helps the wildlife, it really helps the department as well to be able to have enough, coverage in these areas. Other than that, it's pretty simple. You guys have had a lot of the questions on the previous bill that I'm sure will come up on this one. Again, Senator Ellis, if you'll see in mine, it says shall. I am open to any questions.
Questions for Representative Wiley? Senator Ellis?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm just curious about the insertion of the specific 6 a.m. I'm just trying to think of a scenario or why we pick 6 a.m., I guess is my first question. And then on the effective date, again, just a drafting preference. I think, I am curious to know if we were to get rid of all that, the commission shall promulgate rules, that is effective immediately. What if we just said this act is effective July 1st? I'm wondering if that messes with your bill at all.
Representative Wiley?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Senator Ellis, no, I would be open to that. And then the question to where 6 a.m. on May 1, that was working with the department so they will have the latitude to have personnel in the area and stuff. So it's not so draining on their resources.
Questions? Senator Baldwin?
Just observation, informational, what is the cost of a non-resident conservation stamp?
Senator Baldwin, I believe it's like $21.50. And you know, the thought behind this is it kind of goes beyond that. You know, you get these folks that don't even come into our communities or our towns. But in many instances, like I said, it's almost like a picture of a land grab. So you could have actually a higher population of folks just outside of town than actually there are residents in said town. So this will give them the opportunity to come into town, talk with the local folks, get their conservation stamp, maybe a tank of fuel, some groceries, talk to some of the people, you know, that they're having a heavy impact on. And I think it's just going to be a win-win thing. And you know, the emails and stuff that I've had said, you know, we would be okay to be able to, you know, come and get this conservation stamp.
Senator Jones, do you have a question?
I do. Chairman, do you see any reason why these two bills couldn't overlap? The bill that we just saw previously and this bill, is there any reason why they couldn't overlap and both of them still work?
Thank you, Senator Jones. That's an excellent question. And actually, yes, they can't overlap. They kind of complement one another, but my bill wouldn't be germane to the previous bill that we had. So it has to be kind of its own stand on its own type of deal.
Senator Ellis?
Thank you, Madam Chair. On page 3, I just want to make sure I'm understanding the intent clearly. So the conservation stamp's not required for any resident of Wyoming. That makes sense to me. Any person under the age of 15. So if you're out of state and you're 15 or under, you don't have to pay the stamp. And then just the enforceability, the nonprofit organization. So if you're an out-of-state nonprofit, then you also don't have to pay. Can you clarify?
Senator Ellis, correct. So it's simply put there, you know, we don't want to put this burden on children or, you know, families that bring kids in. The nonprofit thing, it was addressed in the bill before. We don't want to take away from the Scouts or any nonprofit for that matter that would be affected by that. So this is basically just, you know, adult out of state folks that come in and collect these shed antlers.
Follow up, or you're good? I just have one question. And again, it's the enforcement issue. Do you feel like it might be conducive, since we might be checking for licenses and license plates anyway, that it would be a little bit easier to check for that stamp as well for our enforcement people? Do you consider that maybe something that might, when you talked about the two bills working congruently, would that help the situation?
Yeah. Madam Chairwoman, absolutely. I think, like I said, it'll be complementary. And then, you know, we wanted to keep it as economical and cost efficient as possible. And that's why we kept it at a conservation stamp, because that's already readily in use. And it's really easy just to print off the machine when you go into the sporting goods store or the C store, whoever's selling them. And then, you know, when the wardens and stuff come up, they'll be able to just, it's a quick thing to check. And then also when you're in there, maybe you want a fishing license or a small games license or anything else to enjoy, you know, Wyoming's outdoors.
Question? Senator Ellis?
Madam Chair, I'm just thinking through the last question I had. Again, I'm comfortable with the notion of Wyoming resident. We know what that is. Any person under the age of 15. So if you're an out-of-stater with a parent and you're out there, then you don't have to have the stamp if you're underage. But it is this notion of the nonprofit. It just seems a little difficult to enforce. And so I am wondering, you know, if you're a resident of Wyoming and you're a nonprofit in Wyoming, you're covered already. So are we really worried about the nonprofit out-of-state group not having to pay the fee? To me, I'm just, for the enforcement piece, I'm like, you know, I serve on lots of nonprofit boards. We do business, you pay fees. I just seems like that might be a little too far for me.
Okay, thank you, Senator Ellis. Great question. We included this during working of the bill over on the House side, just because of the impact that it would have on specific nonprofits that have people from in or out of state, or, you know, we had the discussion earlier about disabled folks. So this would kind of cover all those people to where you don't have to, you know, put too much into this bill, and it would be like if you're part of a nonprofit, then it's covered and you're okay. So, I mean, you could go from the Scouts to Special Olympics, whatever nonprofit that you want to pick. So we just want to make sure those folks can come and enjoy the outdoors, and we don't want to put an extra burden upon them.
Other questions or comments?
Madam Chair.
Senator Ellis?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Do you think the sentence on page 3, lines 6, 7, and 8, the commission shall adopt rules necessary to issue a conservation stamp, is that language necessary?
Representative Wiley?
I would like to, Madam Chair, or Senator Ellis, I would like you to address the department on that. And then whatever you folks see fit, I would be agreeable to.
Okay. Thank you. I don't see any other questions, so I appreciate your testimony and hang around just in case we have any other questions for you.
Thank you very much.
We'll go ahead and open it to our agency folks first and can I get their take on this bill. Welcome again. Glad to have you back.
Madam Chair, thank you. So several good questions were brought up. I'll start with the first, or I'll go backwards. So page 3, lines 6, 7, and 8, the commission shall adopt rules necessary to issue a conservation stamp under this paragraph. That I think Senator Ellis, you're correct. That's not necessary. The second question that was brought up about the 6 a.m. portion. So that language mirrors what is currently in regulation. So in regulation right now, it's the closures from January 1 to 6 a.m. on May 1st. And I think you bring up a good point that rather than being really specific in the statute, maybe 6 a.m. comes out and just leave the May 1st date there. And then that way, if the commission saw fit to change the opening time, they'd have that flexibility to do so. And then the effective date, if the effective date was July 1, just as it was mentioned, so it mirrored up with the previous bill, that I think that would help the commission in terms of our rules and regulations.
Questions? Yes, go ahead, Senator Ellis.
Madam Chair, just to follow up then, I'm guessing that if we added the clarification of state or public lands on page 2, line 3, and then again on page 3, line 3, horns on designated state or public lands, that would be maybe friendly and helpful to you.
Chief?
Madam Chair, Senator Ellis, I would agree. That would make these match up closer and not be in conflict.
Any other questions for Chief King or the director? Okay, thank you. Anyone else in the room that would like to testify on this bill? Do we have anybody online? Okay, bring him in.
Madam Chair, we have Laura Pearson.
Okay. Oops. Looks like Andrew's back in the room. Was going to testify on this one?
Hello.
Hi. We have pretty short on time, so just keep it.
Okay.
Appreciate it. Thanks.
It's just going to be quick. Hi, Madam Chair. This is Laura Tolliver Pearson, Sheep Rancher, Southwest Wyoming again. So I'm not opposed to this bill. I'm either or on this. But I think that we need to add language in there about our immigrant workers. So making them exempt, only because it's going to be your ranchers that have to pay for this conservation stamp. And if the herders get caught with these horns in between these dates, it's going to be your ranchers that have to pay that $450 fine. I'm telling you that, because we have to pay all of the fees, all of their travel, everything. And so we need to have language in there where these herders are able to pick up these horns and not be in trouble for it. Otherwise, your ranchers are going to have to pay for those fines.
Questions for Ms. Tolliver? Okay, thank you again for your testimony. We appreciate it. Thanks for bringing up
Thank you.
something we hadn't thought about. So,
okay, bye-bye.
Thanks. So are we good now? Oh, Andrew wants to come back. Again, we're pretty short on time, so if you could keep it really quick.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, Madam Chairwoman and committee. I am strongly supportive of this. I just suggest a very important amendment is that everyone pays to play. Everyone buys a conservation stamp. It's $21.50. One antler, if you were to sell it, would make more than $21.50. The biggest concern I have is, why are we approaching Wyoming residents as if it's a welfare state? Why are we not required to pay into enforcement of this resource? I'm very concerned that we're setting a precedent that we get it for free, but everyone else has to pay. And a specific example of this, applying to a Wyoming or past Wyoming resident, what happens to one of my friends who's lived in Teton Valley, born and raised here for 25 years, is outpriced in his housing, moves to Idaho, 30 minutes away, and decides to come back? Why is he being punished for this? So I would just suggest that everyone pays $21.50, everyone lines up and has a great time, and it supports our, our law enforcement and our resource.
Thank you very much. Appreciate the testimony. Questions? Okay, thanks again. All righty. Anybody else? Okay.
Yes, Madam Chairman, we have Josh Metten.
Okay, bring him in. Welcome. We're really short on time, so if you could keep it really quick and short, that would be helpful.
Chairwoman Schuler, members of the committee, Josh Metten, Theodore Roosevelt Conservation Partnership. One of the things about Theodore Roosevelt is that he was one of the people that started working over 100 years ago to bring in hunters and anglers to conserve the resources that we have here and self-regulate. So I also support this bill. I think that the comments by the previous testimony of like, why are we not all just paying for a conservation stamp? Like, it seems silly to me that we're gonna not have Wyoming residents contribute to collecting a public resource and benefiting from a public resource and not pay back into the system that can help our wildlife resources. So I'd also stand in support of amending the bill to make it so that everyone is paying for a conservation stamp.
Okay, questions? Okay, I don't see any questions. Thank you for your testimony. Appreciate it. Okay, with that, I think we'll go ahead and close public testimony then.
Move the bill.
Move the bill by Senator Ellis, second by Senator Jones.
Madam Chair, I have
And
some amendments.
Okay.
I move on page 2, line 3, after the word on, insert state or. On page 2, line 22, delete 6 a.m. Page 3, line 3, insert designated state or before the words public lands. I would further move on lines 6, starting with the sentence the last the, and then delete lines 7 and 8. I would delete the contents of section 2 and in its place put this act is effective July 1st, 2023, and then delete all of section 3.
Okay, let's get all of that. Right, you are so quick. Thank you. Any discussion on those amendments? Question has been called on those amendments. All those in favor of those, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed?
Madam
Okay,
Chair?
that is also passed.
Oh, sorry.
Okay, go ahead.
One more. I would, and this one I just want to keep separate. Page 3, line 4, after Wyoming, delete the comma and insert or. Page 5, or line 5, excuse me, after the word H, insert a period and strike the rest of that line as well as 6. So this would be the conservation stamps only for residents, or not necessary for Wyoming residents or youth under 15. I think I understand the argument for the nonprofit, but I think we're trying to make this accommodating at some level. If you're part of a nonprofit, but you live out of state, buy the stamp. That's kind of my theory on it. I just think it's a lot of exemptions. So I think just trying to narrow it in.
Questions on that or discussion on that? Okay. Okay, question on that? Anyone, everyone that would like to vote on that particular amendment, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay, no?
No, it is not.
Oh, okay. That amendment is passed. Okay, Senator Baldwin.
One more quick one, and this may be disagreeable, and I'll probably lose it, but that's okay. I'm used to losing. And that is I would assert that most of these people are out there collecting sheds, probably are hunters, and will have a conservation stamp anyway. And I would just change this to include residents as well as non-residents. Just flat, if you're gonna hunt sheds, get a conservation stamp. Because I believe in most business. So I would propose that shall require, on the bottom of page 2, it says, shall require, I would strike non-residents, shall require all the way to A. So strike non-residents all the way to A. So it shall require a conservation stamp for the collection of big game shed antlers.
Okay, discussion on that. Senator Jones?
I'm sorry, I kind of think like the little bit purpose of this bill was kind of to give an advantage to the Wyoming residents, so sorry, but I do disagree with that.
Any other discussion? Okay, let's go ahead and take a vote on that. All those in favor of slashing non-residents on page 3, line 1, please say aye. Opposed? No? No. Sorry. Good idea, though. Really good idea. Don't want to ruin your day. With that,
I gotta go home.
with that, I think we will go ahead and take a roll call vote.
Thank you, Madam Chair. House Bill 276, Shed Antler Horns Conservation Stamp. Senator Baldwin.
Aye.
Senator Ellis.
Aye.
Senator Guru is an aye. Senator Jones.
Aye.
Chairman Schuler.
Aye.
We have 5 ayes as amended.
Okay, thank you for that, and I'm not sure who will carry that bill. You have anybody in mind?
Stacy.
Kolb, okay. Either Senator Jones or Senator Kolb. We'll do a rock, paper, scissors. Thank
You're in
you.
the chair today?
I'm in the chair today,
So
yeah.
it comes up, do you want me to move the bill?
That, would you? I appreciate that. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Okay, all right, thanks.
Good senator.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah, I just thought I'd throw that in there.
no, hey,
I don't want to think that we didn't do it.
yeah,
I really don't care. I bet you.
I'm a few months, like, other countries probably already have them.
yes,
But just,
yes.
it kind of makes it seem like we're giving them a